Hey, what's up? Ryan here. And if you're staring at a screen like this, probably means you're trying to use generative AI. And whether you're using Gemini here, or Claude, or ChatGPT, or Grok, they pretty much all present you with this same exact screen. And so today I'm going to walk you through a process or a kind of way to think about it so that you can go from noob to one of the greatest people around, at least in your little circle, at using generative AI really fast. And I'm going to walk you through the framework of how to use it. But let's start off right off the bat. Part number one, AI and how it works. So at a very simplest form, you have a prompt. That's kind of that box. Whatever you type into there is going to be thrown against the language model, and it's going to respond by kind of predicting what comes next. And so if you think about if I ask it a question, where should I visit in Japan, and I throw it against the language model, it's responding with what it believes comes next in that sentence, which is the answer, right? Really fairly simple, but a very, very complicated way to think about it. Now, one of the very first things right out of the box for us to understand is a lot of people are worried about two main things. Number one, the security of the information. And by that, I mean, when I send a prompt over here to the language model and it comes back, does it leave my information there? The simple answer is maybe. If I look into, say, Gemini or Claude, what I'm looking for is the ability to turn off my history or turn off it training the model. And so if you look into ChatGPT as a great example here, you'll see that right here inside of these workplaces, it doesn't use it to train the model. But if we look at our personal accounts, it most likely does. And so that's our very first thing, is what we want to know is, will it use my information to train its model and therefore leave the information there? You want to make sure that's set to no. So that's our very first thing. Second thing is hallucination. And what I mean by that is, are the answers that it's giving back to me going to be accurate? This part is really important. And the way to think about it is, how important is the accuracy of that should dictate how much you rely on it without validating it or verifying it's correct. The problem with this is, if I give it a prompt and asking it, tell me the answer, it wants to validate me back by saying this is the answer. And that doesn't mean it's going to be right or wrong. The very easiest way to start with that is, instead of asking for a precise answer, ask for what the answers could be and the likelihood they're right or wrong. Open up what you're asking and you will get a more open response. But at the end of the day, the number one thing you got to keep in mind, if you can't verify that the answer is right, then you need to figure out how important it is that you're getting the right answer and proceed with caution from that. So that's kind of our very first part. But this exposes one of the biggest problems that we have with generative AI right now. And we call this the mirror effect. What I mean by that is, it's mirroring you. And by mirroring you, I mean, if you believe that it is a search engine, it's going to respond as if it's a search engine. If you believe it's meant for writing emails, it will respond as a tool for writing emails. Now, that's great that it's so responsive, but the problem is, it means that the context or the way we view it is the way it's going to respond, and it's not going to get outside of that unless we ask it to get outside of that. Why this is so important is that the majority of people using generative AI are using it for one or two of the potentially hundreds of ways it could be used, and they don't know any better unless they talk to people and ask them this one question: how do you use generative AI? How do you use ChatGPT? Or a better question would be, what's the craziest, most creative ways you've used it? If you want to know the number one way to improve your ability with generative AI, you start with improving the number of contexts or ways that you believe it can be used. And you do that by just asking that one simple question: what's the most creative and powerful way that you use generative AI? Ask everybody you know, write it all down, and then go back to ChatGPT or whatever and say, how would I go about using generative AI as, and put in that thing. And it will start to improve your context. Brings us to point number two: quality in, quality out, garbage in, garbage out. Your skill with using it is more important than its capabilities. So we had number one, which was, it will be whatever I say it will be. Number two is, it's going to be as good as I am at using it. We would call that prompt engineering, but it goes way beyond that, and the word engineering is kind of messy. So the way instead to think about it is, how good am I at communicating and collaborating with it? How good am I at asking it questions? How good am I at providing it context about me? It knows everything about everything, but nothing about me. That's super important. And so as I get better at providing it knowledge about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, and what I'm trying to accomplish, and I get better at asking it questions and collaborating back and forth, I will get back better responses. And then the final part, number 3, is by default, you're in the driver's seat. You have to steer the conversation and drive the outcome you want. That's a lot of pressure. So today I'm going to show you how to solve for that. But these 3 things are really important. It's going to mirror how I believe it can act, and therefore I'm limiting its potential in my life if I don't continue to expand my ways that I believe it can work. Number 2, my capability, my way that I'm using it is limiting how good it is at doing that thing. And number 3, by default, I'm in the driver's seat. Therefore, if I get to a bad spot, it's my fault. If I want to go to a great spot, then I need to get better at driving it. So let's move on to part number 3. Part number 3 is if you're just using it for a one and done, a single query, I ask a question, I get back an answer, and I'm done, kind of like you would think a search engine, that is massively withholding the potential it can have in helping you with something. Collaboration takes back and forth. It takes working together. It takes a partnership, like a conversation, not a single request. So if you think it's a single prompt, one and done, like a request, it responds and I'm done, you are massively limiting your potential with it. Instead, think about it more like a conversation. We have to get to know you. We need to talk about things. We need to get context. We need to get on the same page in order to get to a great result. And the more important the result is I want, the more that I'm going to have to give it more information and have a back and forth collaboration. And that brings us to our final part. And I call this the expert framework. This is the number one thing that you need to turn ChatGPT or any generative AI into a powerful tool in your hands. You need to, whenever you start a brand new thread, follow this step-by-step process. Part number 1, define its role in the project you're working on. Tell it what type of expert you want it to be and the project or task that you need help with. Include as much as you can give it, your goals, your desired outcomes, whatever the case may be. So if I was starting a brand new thing here, I might say, I want you to be my expert teaching assistant. And the project we are working on is teaching employees how to use generative AI as a sidekick at work, right? So I've defined what I want up front, and I can go ahead and press enter. Now, I could be more descriptive. I want to give them shortcuts, a main shortcut approach to set it up as an expert for a given project, where it will know about them and be super helpful. Right? So that's our first part. Define the expert and the project. And I can just go ahead and hit go, and I'll jump back over here while it's running and move to step 2, which is I need to provide it more context. While yes, the prompt I just put in is going to give it some information, it really doesn't know enough about me, right? Or enough about who I'm going to teach. So now I want to actually ask it a question. What do you need to know about me to make this project successful? And then provide the answer. So going back over here, I can see that it's starting to map out some information, and it's giving me back some steps, and it's giving me back a bunch of stuff. But now I can say, what do you about me, my company, and the intended listener or learner to make this project successful? Right? What do you need to know about me? This starts to point it back at me to say, hey, what do you need to know? Because what I'm trying to do, there's probably 1,000 people in the world who are wanting to teach people about generative AI and how to jumpstart their ability to use it at work. And you can see inside of my project, I gave it some really good context. Teaching employees, that's different than people, right? Using it as a sidekick at work, it's starting to give it some ideas. But down here, when I say, what do you need to know, right? It's now going to come back with a bunch of questions, right? About me, the instructor, right? What's my role? About what is my personal experience and the goals for the project, about my company. How big is if I'm teaching internal employees, external employees, how big's my company? What industry are we in? What do we currently use? Our company culture, about the intended listener or learner. Who are the employees? What are their jobs? What are their roles? You see, all of a sudden it's saying, wait a second, we don't want this to be generic. We want it to be very specific. Now, this brings us to one of the most important parts ever, which is provided the answers via voice. If you are following this and you go, oh my gosh, that's so much for me to type, there are 3 different ways for you to provide a massive amount of context. Number 1, you see this little voice icon right here? I could just start talking to it and literally go up here and talk through all of the answers. So that's option number 1. Almost all of the tools out here have a voice component. So that's option number 1. Option number 2, I can grab my iPhone really quick and go to voice memo. You see all these voice memos I got here, right? On here, you can see all my voice memos. I could just hit record on my iPhone, and when I'm done, the 3 little dots will let me copy a transcript from my phone. So I could literally say, like, I work at a tech company with 50 employees. My goal is to train them about generative AI and specifically about how to build AI agents that can help them with their job, right? So I could use that. I go ahead and hit copy transcript, and I can now paste the transcript in, right? So that's number 2. Number 3 would be to use Otter or something like that to transcribe the calls and meetings I'm in, to actually transcribe it out, whether it's Otter or Fathom or whatever the case may be, in which case I would add it as a file. So that gave us our part number 2, provide context and clarity. That brings us to part number 3, which is map out the next steps. We want to ask it what the options are for the next steps and then tell it to take the lead. So going back to Gemini here, I gave it some information, and now I can say, what are the possible next steps for you to help me with this process, this project, in a collaborative way? And I could say the next steps or options, right? Ask it, what are the next steps, right? It's going to come back and it's going to say, well, here is an entire flow of planning and designing and drafting in all different ways, right? This is giving me the next steps. And so now I can say, can you take the lead in the collaboration and guide the whole flow? Put it in the lead, right? That means it's going to take the lead, and you can see as it's mapping this out at the very end, it's probably going to ask me for a question. Let's get started. To kick us off, please provide the information requested in step 1, right? Once I have this, I'll move directly to step 2, step 3, etc. And once again, now I'm just going to go back and forth using voice to dump transcripts in there to let it go through the whole process. That brings us finally to step 4, structured output. What I mean by that is that when it comes time to actually produce something, meaning an email, a report, a slide deck, a whatever the case may be, if I don't tell it the voice, the lingo, the phrasing, the structure, the template, the framework to follow, it's going to make it up on its own. So if I don't like the output, or if I want to have more control over it, then I need to tell it. I need to say, hey, I want this to write like me. I want it to sound like me. I want it to flow like this email over here, like this blog post over there. I want to give you structure to how you create the output. Now, I could use number 2 in number 4. I could say, hey, I want this to sound and talk just like me. I want it to flow just like one of my blog posts. So what do you need to know about me to do that? And then it will probably ask me a series of questions, and then I provide it with that, and then it will sound and talk just like me. But this one framework right here, if you use it over and over and over again, will dramatically improve the value you get from generative AI. Again, number 1, define the role. I want you to be my expert, fill in the blank. And the project I want your help with is blah, 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 blah. And make sure that you don't just tell it what you're working on, but what is the goal or the desired outcome. Number 2, provide it with context by asking it, what do you need to know? And then giving it a transcript of your answers to that. Number 3, ask it to map out what the next steps are. What will make this a successful project? What are the next steps? And then tell it to take the lead. And finally, number 4, if you want the output to be sound like you, talk like you, flow like one of your things, then you're going to need to tell it what that means. How do you talk? How do you write? What is your flow? What is the template? And most likely saying, what do you need to know in order to sound like me, talk like me, follow a given template or a framework, or to mimic an example I have, it's going to tell you how exactly to provide it that information so it works the right way. Now, just as we end here, one final tip. If you don't want to have to do this each time, there is a trick for this. I'm going to show you my trick for it in ChatGPT. If you come into ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, they all do the same thing. Go find the customized settings, right? In here, I can give it information about who I am. I can tell it about what I do for work. I can give it things about me or my voice or whatever, but this right in here is really important. I can give it the traits or the flow of how I want it to respond. And in this instance, you'll see I'm saying, ask me these questions one at a time and wait for my response every time I start a new conversation. So I say, hey, I want you to be my superhero sidekick at work. When I say I need help, I would like you to take control of the conversation and walk me through the following process. Question number 1, ask me what type of expertise or expert I want you to be. Question 2, ask me to tell you about the project we're working on today. Question 3, ask me a series of questions to provide, provide me to gather enough personal information about the situation, remind me to speak in my answers using the mic icon or a voice memo. Question number 4, ask me to give you a transcript of my answers. Question number 5, give me back a list of options that you can help me with and continue to collaborate on this project. Always provide me with the next logical steps and take the lead. And question number 6, anytime we're writing content, always use my voice and structure writing to sound just like I wrote it, right? Provide me with options of compelling, engaging writing frameworks, or ask me which one I want to use. You can see here that I've now built that in so that every time I start a new conversation, it's going to force me to walk through that entire process. So if you have any questions, feel free to hit me up. Otherwise, thanks so much for watching. We'll talk to you later.